This will be the last part of my guides for Xing Tian's mountain, and this time we're looking at items. I've gone through some item builds that some of the pros used. I've looked at some numbers and checked some item builds, how they match up best with the prices and all that stuff, and come to a conclusion of which builds I would generally recommend for the physical characters, for the tank, and for the magical characters. We will go through all three, starting with the tanks, then going for the physical characters, and then the magical characters. For tanks, things are relatively simple. Most of the time, you definitely want Sovereignty, Hide of the Urchin because it stacks very easily in that mode, and Heartward Amulet. This provides not only you, but also your team with more defenses, and in some rounds that is really important, especially when one target gets focused down very hard. They need those extra protections, and you can't always control that you will be that target as the tank. There are some outlier options, for example, Rod of Asclepius on Fafnir, or generally some more cooldown reduction focused builds, but more often than not, I would recommend getting those team defense items and then something extra in order to allow the most protection possible for your team. However, it's worth pointing out that Traveler's Shoes is still purchasable at the moment. This may get fixed eventually. Apparently, Hydra has already announced that they don't want to keep it in the game in the state that it's in right now in that particular mode. So it might be removed later on, but for now, I would recommend starting with Sovereignty, Hide of the Urchin, and Traveler's Shoes, and starting to build into Heartward Amulet and then finish it up later and maybe get, for example, a Ritual Dagger afterwards for some more CDR and health and stuff like that. So as long as that's available, I would not start with those three items right away, but get a Traveler's Shoes in and then trade it out later in the stages when you will need more defense. When it comes to physicals, two things are very straightforward. You always want Crusher and Titan's Bane. Now why is that? Titan's Bane is really important, as a lot of the characters you're fighting against will have stacked defenses, meaning they will have up to 300 defenses, and flat penetration does pretty much nothing to them. For example, the Loki, if you have up to 300 defenses and you get 10 penetration, that's so little extra damage that it hardly even matters. As such, the percentage penetration is really important. Now, in theory, you could go Executioner and it would do the same thing, but it doesn't work as well against structures, or rather, it doesn't work against structures at all. The Manticore round being one of the hardest rounds of them all, it means that you will need some extra structure damage, and as such, Titan's Bane is pretty much mandatory on all characters that are physical, especially since you are often stuck with the more magical than physical characters, and you wouldn't benefit all that much from Executioner then anyways. There's also the other pretty much mandatory item, which is Crusher. Same logic here. Crusher is a nice item in terms of power and gives you that little bit of flat pen, which is not that important here, but helps against the weaker targets with not that much defense, but it's generally bored for the Manticore round, just so you have more damage against that structure, and the other tower round where it's not quite as important. After that, your build becomes more flexible. One variant that I think is really good is Runeforged Hammer plus Short Bow. That way you get extra damage against any target that's slowed, and a lot of comps that you're going to utilize in this mode will have a lot of slows. So if that works for you, if that works well for your team, then it's a good option. It's not the only option though. I also like the combination of Witchblade for some attack speed reduction on enemies and some extra defense along with some attack speed for you, and Hydra Star, giving you some more ability damage along with some more attack damage via attack speed, while the attack speed and the Runeforged combination comes from Short Bow. You can also go for Kin Sais. It is decent in some encounters which have a lot of health, as your DPS nearly doubles with Kin Sais there, but it's not that great on many others. Or you can go for a combination of Ichaival and either Thousandfold Bait or going into Hydra's Star here as well. So those are some flex options that I think are good, depending on if you're an assassin or a hunter. But all of these items basically have their place there. Items that I found don't work that great are Ancile, simply because the proc is just too rare and it doesn't work very often, as many targets are CC immune at the beginning of the fight. Bloodforge, because some encounters that are usually the harder ones don't really allow for too many guard kills. It is beneficial on some, but as you have to deal the last hit damage, it's kind of hard to pull it off effectively. Crit, because crit is simply too expensive to work well here. And Mane of Renewal. I actually thought that Mane of Renewal would be really good, but once again, you're too dependent on targets dying in that round, and in certain rounds enemies don't die until the round is finished. So instead, if you want to go for more defense, I would rather recommend going for Hide of the Urchin and Shortbow, which will give you some extra defense, though it's debatable if you will actually need extra defense. Usually more damage is better than more defense here. And talking about more damage, we are getting down to the mages. The mages generally all benefit from building Rod of Tahuti. It's an extreme burst in power, and you want to have that extra power in order to be completely effective, and with boots not being that important, you can get those and then combine them with some other items that make them stronger. Now, obviously, the same thing applies here. You can still buy Traveler's Shoes, and as long as you can do that, I would recommend doing so and trading out items later. You can, for example, start with Rod of Tahuti, Demonic Grip, and Traveler's Shoes on Poseidon in order to get some extra attack speed, and then slowly build into Obsidian Shard or Poly or whatever you want to do. And that will work very, very well. Or you can, for example, on other mages, if you have multiple mages in your team, go for Traveler's Shoes, Rod of Tahuti, and Pythagorem's Piece, and then once again build into Obsidian Shard and the other stuff that you think you will need. The other stuff is really dependent on your playstyle and the mage you're playing, but the items that I would generally recommend are Dynasty Plate Helm, Demonic Grip for more attack speed focused ones like Sol, Poseidon, and so on, Poly for those as well, just to get some extra structure damage in, and Obsidian Shard for pretty much any mage for the later stages, where you need to get the structures around the Manticore down as fast as possible in order to progress. And also, once again, in order to have more damage against those targets that have very high base protections. In this regard, Demonic Grip also helps, obviously, as it will reduce the protections for your whole team, allowing you to burst much, much harder. Now, I don't know if and when the Traveler's Shoes change will come up, but if it does happen, then the safest bet will probably be Rod of Tahuti, Obsidian Shard, and Dynasty Plate Helm most of the time. But you can also, you know, toy around a little bit. Maybe not get Rod on one mage and get some more team utility, like Pythagorem's Piece or Demonic Grip on that particular mage, in order to help the team more and let other characters burst more. But you will see how it works out best. But when it comes to relics, things are a little more limited. If you want to get to later stages, you will pretty much need Sanctuary on everyone but your tank. This is kind of annoying in my opinion, but it's just what it is. There are simply too many encounters where you can get immediately bursted or locked down, like while the Nox encounter happens and stuff like that. So in those, you just want to get your Sanctuary going in order to be as effective as possible by surviving the initial burst and then getting your damage off. Along with that, the items you want on your team are always at least one, but mostly two Frenzy in order to have more damage on your whole team the whole time. Then at least one Sunder to take down those tankier targets like Nox or Loki as quick as possible with the highest damage possible. One Shell to avoid burst in most situations, and you can consider one Meditation, or you can go for something else if you think something else is more important for your team. You can for example go for two Sunders and stuff like that, but those are the items you're typically choosing from. You kind of want a Sprint in there just to get away from the Manticore if you want to kite it around the map, or maybe a Curse if you want to counter certain encounters like Vamana that way, but usually that's not even necessary. So yeah, if you go for those, you should be absolutely fine, and you should have everything that you need for this mode covered. The Sanctuaries are probably the most important thing and most mandatory thing, which a lot of people didn't know about earlier on, including me. That's it for this video. As always, I hope this was helpful. I hope this will help you progress in that mode. Thank you guys for watching. New video tomorrow. Duke Sloth, out.